Hey nerds, and welcome to the CW 4-part Invasion crossover, Theories and Conspiracies. I'm Brian from Good Nerd Bad Nerd. So all week we've been having DC's big, epic 4-hour event with Supergirl, Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow dealing with this invasion storyline. And just right off the bat, compared to the comic, it's as close as the TV show could get. They had the opportunity to use Martian Manhunter because they have him on Earth 3, I think that's what they're calling Kara's Earth, but they didn't. But that's okay. That, you know, the way it all worked out, it was a great 4-part event. I had a good time watching it. Jumping into this because there is a lot to cover, but I'm really just going to focus on really getting into the nitty-gritty of Flash and Supergirl because those are the things I cover most. I will talk a little bit about Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow, but mainly I'm going to give you most of the things I saw from Flash and Supergirl. But we're just going to go through it. So, starting with Supergirl. Now, this episode really didn't have too much to do with the entire invasion storyline. The only stuff they had to do here was get Supergirl from her Earth to Earth 1. And outside of that, it was kind of a standalone Supergirl episode. But things we did out of in this episode, again, we had Cyborg Superman. I've talked about him in the past and Hank Henshaw and that. Since I didn't do an episode last week, really quick on Hank Henshaw and this whole Cyborg Superman thing, him just coming out and saying it was really lame. But, you know, every time he says it, it just comes across like really forced and really bad. But that being said, I do like that we are finally getting Cyborg Superman and the real Hank Henshaw, and it's going to make for a really good fight. Now, it'll be interesting to see what he does next, because Cadmus, as far as we know, is dead. Or is it? Lena Luthor's mother was the head of Cadmus, and Lena, although it looked like she was betraying Supergirl, actually set up her mom because she really does not want to be defined by the role that her brother was, or the role that her mother was tending to lay out. And, you know, she played that role very well. So that was, I have to admit, I didn't believe she was really turning bad, but they did fool me. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Now, the last thing, and this is where it does tie in with the invasion, Barry and Cisco showing up. When that portal first appeared, I actually had really hoped Barry would have shown up then with Cisco, because too often in these things, it is right at the last moment of the episode they show up. It's like, hey, we're here. Okay, let's just tease for the next week's episode. It's like at the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. each week, if you're watching that, where they have stay tuned for more, and they give you a tease about what's coming. That's what they did. I would have much preferred they pop up in the middle of the fight. There's chaos because nobody knows what's going on, and it throws everything, and maybe that's how Cyborg Superman gets away. But they did what they did, and we saw that scene play out in Kara's apartment. This scene we would then once again see in the Flash episode the next day. But again, it was a standalone episode that didn't have too much to do with the invasion storyline, but it was a good episode. Now, that takes us into the Flash episode. Now, really quick before we get into this, the next 3 episodes each dealt with a different kind of conflict. And it's something that is, for people who've taken kind of college literature courses, things like that, you'll understand what I'm trying to explain. But you have in the Flash episode, you had the conflict was of hero versus hero. And as you're dealing with the Flashpoint fallout and everyone is kind of turning on Barry, and then you literally have everyone turn on Barry when they are getting their mind wipes or taken over by the Dominators, you do have this hero versus hero conflict. How do you fight your friends? How do you rise to that occasion without hurting them, but stopping what's controlling them? And from the Flashpoint point of view, how does Barry make amends for what he's done? You know, he's beating himself up for it, but how does he get past that? How does he make it right for Cisco? How does he make it right for Diggle? And many others. But that's kind of what that episode was about, hero versus hero conflict. And it was probably, I'm not going to say it's the strongest, but I really liked it. Those Cisco Barry moments are really hard to watch because they're just done so well. You really feel Cisco's pain that he's going through. Now, just a nice thing that was kind of a shout out to a lot of other animated series from the comics, the old comics. That Star Labs building is the Hall of Justice. You've seen this in the original Super Friends, the Batman cartoon show that was called The Batman. They used it as the Justice League's watchtower up in space. I even think Young Justice used a version of that for kind of a museum for the team, which was actually just kind of a public face for the Justice League. But that was a very cool thing, and hopefully it's foreshadowing that we are going to get some sort of Justice League in this time where we're going to see different heroes coming and going. That was definitely something I think this entire Invasion storyline was foreshadowing to, but it's we're not there yet. Now, we did really get to see the Dominators this week. They're creepy looking. They're kind of the stuff of horrors, but they looked like they did, from the comics with the big red circle on the forehead. Very, very terrifying creatures. Then, obviously, at the end, once the hero versus hero conflict is resolved and the team is at the point where they trust Barry again, obviously, Cisco does not trust him yet at this point, but they all get kidnapped. And that takes us into the Arrow episode. Now, the Arrow episode represents the kind of hero versus self, where the hero has to overcome what they are, who they are, kind of their dreams, their desires, those things. Now, if this episode seemed really familiar to you and you were watching, and you've been watching Supergirl, this episode to me was a kind of bigger play on the storyline for the Man Who Had Everything from the comics. This is they used the storyline in Supergirl when she was in the psychic world that was created by the Black Mercy. I believe that's the name of this plant, but it creates a fake world where you're kind of, it's supposed to be a prison that gives you everything you could possibly want. And the only way to escape is to rip those things that you want away. And that's what we saw the team, they had to do. For Oliver, he had the life he wanted. His parents were alive. Everyone was alive in his life. There was no fighting. Diggle, was out there protecting the world. Felicity was happy. There was so much going on. And all of them kind of had to tear down that reality that they were all happy in. And so that's where this hero versus self, they had to overcome that for the greater good. And it was a very good episode. Like, it had some really great moments. It wasn't an action-packed. I know a lot of people were critiquing it for that, but that fight at the end was very cool. But overall, this was really about the heroes battling who they are, and kind of what they want versus what they need. And, at the very end, the bar scene with Oliver and Barry kind of addresses that final thing one more time. But that takes us into the Legends of Tomorrow episode, the final episode of this kind of 4-part big crossover. For this episode, this was kind of your straightforward battling the bad guys. It felt very much like a Legends of Tomorrow episode, so that was great. It was spot on. But going back through that hero versus, this is kind of the hero versus monster kind of storyline. You almost see a lot of this in like kind of the ancient Greek stories where Hercules would be battling kind of these giant creatures and things like that. This was the team battling the monsters. They were rising to the occasion, doing these Herculean tasks. Barry and Supergirl distributing these tiny discs all over the country. The team rising up and fighting these creatures that are far more powerful than them. And that's kind of a big thing. This is where the team finally, they've battled each other, they've battled themselves, and now they are finally ready to take on the final enemy, as it were. But honestly, that's not the important thing from this episode. Of course, they win and they scare the Dominators off the planet. They're not totally gone, but this is setting up precedent for a lot of other things to come. Supergirl talked to the president and convinced her to form a DEO on Earth-1. Again, like I said, we're probably going to get some sort of Justice League forming out of that Star Labs building. But the big thing here, and it is the heroes learning to accept and deal with the repercussions of their choices. Cisco's been giving Barry a very hard time, and honestly, justifiably so. Learning the truth about what happened with Flashpoint was difficult, was hard. So you understand Cisco's response. But then he was put in a similar position. He wanted to do what was right, and in doing so, made things worse. Now, Barry's case is a little more selfish, but he sees the parallels. Barry just wanted to do something that he thought was right, and when it turned wrong, he again was trying to set it right. The repercussions of our actions are all things we have to live with. So that's those two. But then you also had Professor Stein learning about the repercussions of his actions with his daughter, a daughter he doesn't know, and now he's learning about her, and he's come to terms with that he has a daughter, and he's realizing it is his fault. He easily could have pawned that off on Barry, but he recognizes that it is his fault, and he's owning up to it, and he's accepting those mistakes. But he's seeing that there are good things that could come from it. This is kind of the bigger thing. It's the lesson all heroes have to learn, is that sometimes in the path to do good, sometimes bad things happen. And that's the entire premise of why the Dominators were attacking. These heroes that were coming to the planet to defend it, the Dominators were worried about the repercussions of what these heroes would be doing, and if it would eventually get to their planet and cause trouble for them there. So it's kind of this big, long, overlapping moral of there are repercussions to our actions. So that was the 4-part storyline. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was a good use of the characters? Obviously, they've given Kara that little breach device so she can come and go whenever they want to use her in a story. But what do you think? Are we close to getting some sort of Justice League? Or is that just more Easter eggs they're throwing in just to make the comic fans happy? Let me know what you guys thought of the entire thing in the comments down below, and what you are hoping to see on next week's mid-season finale. So until next time, guys, this has been Brian from Good Nerd Bad Nerd, and this was the DC Invasion crossover theories and conspiracies.